Emails, like them or loathe them, they're an essential part of business these days. Today, I'm going to talk to you about different email providers. We're going to compare some of the different costs and the features of the different systems, talk about some of the technical stuff, which is me trying to make sure you don't get ripped off, basically. We'll have a little chat about email clients such as Outlook, Macmail, Thunderbird, etc. I'm also going to consider their professional images. So to get started, email providers. So most hosting companies who will host websites will also host your domains, your DNS records, and things like that. People like GoDaddy, 20i, 123reg, FastHosts, they all offer hosted email as a service. Now that runs off of a system called IMAP, which I probably should be able to tell you exactly what that stands for, but I can't. Which was a replacement for POP. So if anybody tries to sell you a POP email account, say no, you want an IMAP account, and I will cover some of the details later on what the differences are. So another email provider is Microsoft 365. That uses Exchange rather than IMAP. Exchange is Microsoft's operating system purely to run emails. That's all it does. It's, in my opinion, the best solution out there. I will go into more details on that later on. And there are different levels of subscriptions available. So you can just have emails, or you can just have access to applications and everything combined as well. And the third sort of big one out there is Google Workspace. That is sort of a bit of a hybrid, really, because they work off of the IMAP email solution rather than Exchange, but it also implements with all the Google services such as Google Calendars, Google Drive, and things like that. But there are some sort of key differences between Microsoft and Google. So moving on, IMAP. Generally, it's quite cheap. As an example, I charge £12 a year for an IMAP email account. It's really not a lot of money. They are generally cheerful. They're quite clunky. They're not particularly smooth to set up with certain things. You generally don't get advanced features, so it doesn't link into your calendars. It doesn't do contacts and things like that. It's just unfortunately the way it is. It can be difficult to set up because it's quite, as I said earlier, it's quite clunky in how it works. It's not a particularly smooth way of accessing it. Some devices, particularly old iMacs, won't work with them because the software doesn't allow us to put in the servers that we need, and they won't communicate with the servers how the servers like to be communicated with. That is one of the downsides to Macs because they can be 10 years old and they run like a dream, but they won't communicate with your emails. IMAP does support two-way sync. So POP, or POP3, which is the post office protocol, is a one-way protocol. So basically, the server receives an email, it sends it off to your email client, and that's it. Once you've got it, it's not on the server anymore. That's it. If your machine dies, you've lost it. IMAP has a two-way sync. So whatever you've downloaded and done on your machine, where you've moved it into a folder and things like that, that will then be synchronized back up to the server, which means you can jump onto a new machine relatively simply and straightforward, sign in again, and it will re-download every copy of everything it's got. That's one of the big benefits of IMAP over POP. There are a lot of hosting companies, as mentioned earlier. There's unlimited web hosting, FastHost, 20i, SecureServer.net, GoDaddy. So they're relatively available. They're not too expensive, and for a simple email solution, they do work. Moving on, Microsoft 365, really easy to use. It's quite simple to set up and get everything working. It works on pretty much every device, sort of regardless of how old it is. Microsoft Exchange has sort of been the industry standard for a large number of years, so it works quite simply. Various subscriptions are available. So a business basic license will just give you an email account and a few other bits and pieces. You can go up to a business standard license, which will give you your Outlook application, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Access, Publisher, and that sort of thing, all included in that one subscription. It works on the Exchange, which is the sort of it's an entire operating system dedicated to handling emails, which is brilliant in my opinion. It You used to, many years ago, have an on-premises Exchange server. Now it's all dealt with in the cloud, which means it's accessible everywhere as long as you've got an internet connection. It's just very simple and it works incredibly well. You get advanced features such as OneDrive. So even with a business basic license, you'll get access to 1 terabyte of cloud storage. You can get access to SharePoint, which is basically a little intranet that you can use within your company to share files, folders, good news stories, and things like that. You can get your calendars as well, and that will synchronize across to your phone, your laptop, wherever else. And you get things like Delve, which enable you to look at it and go, well, I spent 15 minutes working on that document. That member of staff spent 10 minutes working on this document. This was the last person who worked on that. So it's almost like an accountability tool to help you keep track of what your staff, what yourself and what your staff are doing. In my opinion, it's the best value for money because it starts at £5.40 a month for a business basic license, which gives you that terabyte of cloud storage. So you can back up your PC. You get access to SharePoint, calendars, Delve, and a million other things. In certain subscriptions, there is even access to a system called MileIQ, which tracks all your mileage for business purposes. Really great. Basically, within Microsoft 365 is every tool you can think of to basically run your business, whether that's doing marketing and media and promotions and things like that, even down to doing accounts and stuff like that. There's various tools in there to help you with that. You get the Office apps, which is Word, Outlook, Excel, etc. You get that on their current subscription of Business Standard, which is £11.28 a month. To buy each one of those applications separately is around about £120. So it's quite cost effective to go over to a subscription because you get your emails and all the OneDrive and everything else included on that. So Google Workspace, which is the other big player, works on the IMAP system. So it can be a bit clunky, particularly with Apple devices, but you can link that in with Google Calendars, Google Drive, Google Sheets, Docs, etc. So very similar to how Microsoft works, but it's a separate system from the Microsoft stuff. As I said, it can be difficult to set up on some machines, particularly with Apple devices, because they don't allow you to put in specific server details that you need to put in on certain versions of the software. It is cost effective. It is cheaper than Microsoft, but in my opinion, the benefits of Microsoft far outweigh what the cost difference is. With Google, you generally only get 30 gigabytes instead of a terabyte to back up with. So it's 970 gigabytes of space. It's a huge difference for an extra £1 or so a month. As I said, it's got limited backup options, but it is great for collaborating. You can open up a Google Sheet and you can see where everybody else's pointers are while you're all working on it and things like that. The Microsoft system just isn't as smooth or well refined as Google's is with the collaboration side of things. So Google Docs, Sheets, etc. So talking about some of the technical stuff, domain names. I'm assuming we all know what a domain name is, www.yourbusiness.co.uk, .com, .org, .uk, whatever you want. Domain names generally are not that expensive, around £10 to £15 a year, depending on what you want. They're really worth getting. DNS records, these basically point your emails to wherever your emails are hosted, points to your website, wherever your website's hosted, because you can have things in different places. Name servers, that is the server that basically sits at the top that has all the DNS records sitting on it. Hosting, as I've said, you can host things in different locations with different places. So you can have your website with GoDaddy, but your domain is actually hosted by 123reg and your emails are hosted by Microsoft. That's where all of this sort of ties in together. Mailbox sizes. The standard set by Microsoft is a 50 gigabyte mailbox. Some of the IMAP services will only offer you a 10 gigabyte mailbox. Google, I think, gives you either 25 or 50 gigabytes as a standard, but you can generally always buy more if you need it. And that goes for sort of any email service. Administration, Microsoft 365 is relatively simple and straightforward for you guys to administer yourself, to create new accounts, to remove old accounts, assign licenses and things like that. Google Workspace can be a bit more difficult, just in how they lay things out. To me, doesn't seem quite as fluid as it could be. Processes. It's always worthwhile having a process set up in your business. So when somebody joins the company, this is what we're going to do. We're going to create them an email account. We're going to give them these permissions. We're going to send them their logins to their personal email, etc., etc. When somebody leaves, we automatically go in, follow the process that says change their password, remove the license, back the data up, etc. It's always worthwhile having a process. So email clients, Mac Mail comes on all the Apple products, and as I've said, it can be difficult to set up with certain email solutions. It is just the way the system has been designed, unfortunately. Outlook, it's not free, but it does work on Windows and Apple products. You can even get mobile apps as well for it. It tends to be the sort of set standards. The majority of people out there will either use Outlook or Mac Mail. I'd say that it's more heavily leaning towards the Outlook side and the Microsoft side of things. And then there's others. There's Windows 10 Mail. Honestly, don't touch it. It is a dreadful piece of software. They tried to replace Windows Live Mail a number of years ago when Windows 10 came out, and it just all fell apart. And then there's things like Mozilla Thunderbird, which is a very small, quick, easy, efficient mail client. In my opinion, it doesn't look great compared to something like Outlook. It's just not laid out in a particularly nice way, but that is subjective because it's design. It'll work for some people and not for others. So some of the considerations, do you want to be seen as professional? And are you willing to invest a little in yourself? Because a lot of people out there don't have email addresses, which is your name at yourcompanyname.co.uk.com. And for me, okay, because of the industry I'm in, I like to see that somebody's invested a little bit of time and a little bit of money. And these things are not expensive. You can buy a domain, host it, and have an email account for 60, 70 quid. It's not a huge amount of money, but it does give you that more professional look. So, as an example, there's two vans there, both plumbing. And there's a couple of key differences. If you look at the Viking Plumbing and Heating, it says email info at viking-plumbing.co.uk. They've got a domain, they've got their email address, and I think that looks very professional. On the other van, you've got tsplumbingandheating.com. So they've got that domain. They own that domain, but they're not willing to have an email account there. So their email account is tsplumbingandheating at live.co.uk. To me, that doesn't look very professional. You already own the domain. You've already got a website. Why not have an email account? For what they cost, I personally think it looks a lot more professional. So when you are going out looking for emails, always ask around, ask what other people do. That's one of the top tips I can give you is find out from your fellow business owners what they do with their emails and who they would recommend. It's always useful to have a friendly IT guy like myself on hand to answer any questions where you can, at these sessions, pop in and ask questions. And make that investment. That's the best bit of advice I can give you is make a little bit of an investment in yourself just to have that professional image. And that is the end of my presentation.